the videos. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
And what did we deal in the last class? The last tour of stage model. What is it?
Long-term memory.
Long-term memory, that is otherwise called or abbreviated as the
LTM.
LTM. For short-term memory, it is STM, and for long-term memory, it is LTM. Okay. So, did you understand what stage model is? Yes, the memory that is stored or that is occurring in three different stages. The first one or the first store is the sensory memory, then it comes to the short-term memory, then it finally enters the long-term memory, and then it is stored there for so long or unlimited period of time. Okay, and as an opposition to that particular theory, we are going to study another theory, that is levels of processing. What was the name of the people who gave the theory levels of processing? Yesterday I mentioned
Craig and Lockhart.
Craig and Lockhart. Okay, so this is relatively very simple theory in comparison to the other one, the stage model. This just says that there are different levels of processing. There, for example, shallow processing as well as deep processing. In terms of this processing means the processing of information. In this theory, we deal with the processing of information. The deeper the information is processed, the longer it will last. That is the main concept in the theory. Okay, the deeper the information is processed, a particular information is processed, then the longer it will last. That is the basic thing about the levels of processing, and it was given by Craig and Lockhart, levels of processing. And mainly we say that there are two levels of processing. One is shallow processing, other one is deep or deeper. Okay, two levels of, basically we say two levels of processing, shallow processing as well as the deep processing. The things that you have to remember about this theory is that the levels of processing was kind of an opposition to the stage model. In this particular theory, the processing of information is given more importance, not the different stores of information, not the different stages, rather how the information is processed. Is it shallow processing or is it deep processing? That is what is important for this particular theory or for this particular model. Okay, that this one given by the given by people Craig and Lockhart in the year 1972. So we'll just read the text. Ashish, can you start? Levels of processing, page number 136. Yeah.
Levels of processing views a process by Charkar and Lokpal in 1972. This view suggested that the processing of a new information related to manner in which it is
Manner in which. What happened to you? Manner in which.
manner in which it preserved, analyzes, and
Perceive.
understood. Perceived, analyzed, and understood, which
In turn.
is turn determinants
In
that
turn. Which in turn
determines that
the
extent
extent. Where is that and all? Only THE present. The, which is the extent.
the extent to which it will eventually returned, although
Be
this
retained.
view has
Hmm.
This view has undergone many
Hmm.
reviews since
Revisions.
then, revisions since
Then.
then. Yet
Hmm.
its basic idea remains the same.
Same.
Let us examine this view in
Great
greater details.
detail. Okay. So for this particular basic model, that is for different levels of processing, there has been different revisions. That is, other researchers have found out different things about levels of processing. They have added their own concepts. They have made their own theories about it. But here we deal with the basic concept, the basic theory of the levels of processing given by Craig and Lockhart. Okay. Elvina, continue. Next paragraph.
Craig and Lockhart proposed that it is possible to analyze the incoming information at more than one level.
Hmm.
One may analyze it in terms of its physical or structural features. For
Hmm.
example, one might attend only to the shape of the letters in a word, say cat, in spite of whether the word is written in capital or small letters or the color of the ink in which it is written.
Hmm.
This is the first and the shallowest level of processing.
Hmm.
At an intermediate level, one might consider and attend to the phonetic sounds that are attached to the letters, and therefore the structural features are transformed into at least one meaningful word, say a word cat that has three specific letters.
Hmm.
Analyzing information at these two levels produces memory that is fragile and
Like,
is likely to decay rather quickly.
just
However,
a minute. Okay. So till now, what two levels did you see? That one was shallow level of processing. In that, the example given here is the word cat. Okay. And shallow level of processing, what happens is we give attention or we process information regarding the basic structures of what we see or what we hear. Okay. So here we have cat. So we'll see or we'll process this as a curved thing. Here you have a rounded shape with another curve. Here you have a straight line crossing another straight line. So we'll process only in terms of this basic structures of what we see. Okay. Again, I'll show you. See, this is a curved line for C. Another round shape with another curve for A. Then another long line that crosses another line. That might be considered as T, but we don't understand it as T later on. First, we'll see the structures. We'll process the structures of the stimulus. That is happening at a very shallow level of processing. Okay. And in the intermediate level, what happens in between the shallow and deep level, we have an intermediate level. Intermediate level, we might try to uh, make sounds of each of these alphabets. That is k. This might be k. This might be a. This might be t. Okay, like that we might make phonetic sounds regarding the basic alphabets that you see, basic structures that you saw. That might occur at which stage or which level of processing? Intermediate level of processing. And according to this theory, what happens is whether it be shallow level of processing or intermediate level of processing, the memory that is formed for these two levels of processing is very fragile in nature, which means it might get decayed or it might be lost in a very few seconds of or in a very short span of time. Okay, the information processed or the memory present for the shallow level of processing and the intermediate level of processing is very fragile in nature. So that what happens? The memory formed for the shallow level of processing and intermediate level of processing, they can decay very easily or they get lost very easily. That's what happens in the shallow and intermediate levels. For the memory, I'm talking about the memory. Okay, this is another theory of human memory, which is levels of processing. The earlier one was stage model. This is levels of processing by Craig and Lockhart. The shallow and intermediate level we have seen. In shallow levels, we see the basic structures. We process information for the basic structures. Intermediate level, we form certain phonetic sounds of the basic structures that you have seen. We'll associate the structures with the sounds and then process information. We'll form memories for the shallow level of processing and intermediate level of processing, but they are fragile in nature. They'll get decayed easily. Also, they'll get lost easily. Okay, now we'll continue. Meghna, read the rest. However,
However, there is a third and the deepest level at which the information can be processed. In order to ensure that the information is retained for a longer period, it is important that it gets analyzed and understood in terms of its meaning. For instance, you may think of cat as an animal that has fur, has four legs, a tail, and is a mammal. You can also invoke an image of a cat and connect that image with your experiences. To sum up, analyzing information in terms of its structure and phonetic features amounts to shallow processing while encoding it in terms of the meaning it carries. The semantic encoding is the deepest processing level that leads to memory that resists forgetting considerably.
okay,
Res-
just a minute. So at deeper level, what happens? This whole thing is considered as a category. Okay, the shallow level and the intermediate. The intermediate level, I told you we'll process some phonetic sounds of the basic structure, isn't it? So that goes into the shallow thing. That is related to the shallow thing, because in shallow processing, what happens? We process the information about the basic structures. It is based on that basic structures that we do the intermediate processing. So intermediate processing is automatically going into the shallow processing. It is considered as a part of shallow processing. Okay. And in deep processing, what happens is we try to process the information in terms of its meaning. If it is in terms of meaning, what do we say? What is the word used for that?
Semantically.
Semantically, correct. So the processing in the deep level happens semantically, which means in terms of meaning. Now again, coming back to our cat example, what happens? C-A-T, cat. We already read that. In shallow processing, we know the curves, we know the lines, all those things, basic structures. Then in intermediate processing, which is also a part, it can be considered as a part of shallow processing. In that, what happens? We'll assign some sounds for it, k, t, like that. And in deep processing, when it comes to deep processing, we can understand really what this word means. Understood? What this word actually means is included or processed only in the deep level of processing. Hmm? Then only this memory of this particular thing, that is this particular word, can be made intact. If it is processed in terms of its meaning only, it can be put into our long-term memory, or it can be made in such a way that it remains intact in our memory system. That is what the levels of processing theory says. That is, the shallow level of processing or the intermediate level of processing, it might get lost very easily. So for that, for some information to remain in our memory, what should we do? We should do the deeper level of processing. Means we should understand it in terms of our meaning. I'll give you one example in which you can relate to. See, I'm giving you a big definition of psychology for you to study. Hmm? And you process it in terms of the words, in terms of the sounds, and then you learn it by heart. But you don't know what it really means. Okay, I have not, imagine that I have not explained it. So by the time you reach the exam hall and then you're writing the exam, you suddenly find it very difficult to reproduce what you have learned if you don't know its meaning. But if you know its meaning, what happens? You can write, you can fill in some the, it, so, then, whatever in the middle, and then you can make up a definition, isn't it? If you know its meaning, if you know the concept, if you have understood it in depth, then you might be able to reproduce it in such a way that uh, the whole definition which you write is quite meaningful to the person who reads it, isn't it? Yes, you agree? Yeah. So that is the importance of deep level of processing. If something has to be present in the memory, um, if it has to remain intact there, then it has to be understood in terms of its meaning first. In terms of meaning means semantically. So semantically the information is processed in the which level of processing? Shallow or deep?
Deep.
Deep level of processing. So we have the main levels of processing as shallow and deep. I told you that in the beginning. And intermediate comes here, but as main levels of processing, we consider only shallow and deep. Shallow is in terms of the structures, the phonetic sounds and all. And then deep level is in terms of the meaning, that is semantically. Now, I should read the next paragraph.
Understanding memory as an outcome of the manner in which information is encoded initially has an important implication for learning. This view of memory will help you realize that while you are learning a new lesson, you must focus on elaborating the meaning of its contents in as much detail as possible and must not depend on the rote memorization. Attempt this, and you will soon realize that understanding the meaning of information and reflecting on how it relates to other facts, concepts, and your life experience is a sure way to long term retention.
Yes. So, if I told you in the beginning of our psychology class that most of the topics that we learn in psychology is related to our day-to-day life. Remember? Yes. So, whatever concept that you're learning in this, in this duration of the course, if you understand that concept in depth, if you really understand its meaning, if you collect as much as information about it, if you relate this with your own life or maybe your friend's life, your family member's life, then that is likely to remain in your memory system for a very long time. There will be longer retention for that amount of information in your mind. But rather, if you just learn the definitions, write it in the exam, forget it, then it's of no use, isn't it? So that is the importance of two levels of processing. Which are the two levels of processing, Alvina?
Shallow level of processing and deep level of processing.
Shallow levels of processing and deep level of processing. Intermediate is not generally mentioned, but it is there. That goes along with the shallow level of processing. Okay. Any doubt in this? Hmm? Easy theory, as compared to the other one. The stage 3 you have to remember the three stages, then you have to remember the control processes, which are the selective attention, the maintenance rehearsal, chunking, then elaborative rehearsal. You have so much of information there, but here you just have levels of processing theory, shallow level of processing, deep level of processing, the name of people who suggested it, Craig and Lockhart. Okay, if you have any doubt, ask. No. Okay, so I think it's time, no? Okay, sure. Okay, we'll see you in the next class then. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.